By the end of this course, students will be able to demonstrate knowledge of the grammar and syntax of Biblical Hebrew, synthetically for Biblical Hebrew, you should be able to answer things. Again, a working knowledge of Hebrew grammar and translation. When we say a simple sentence, we should be able to interpret, recognize the vocabulary introduced to the course. As I am teaching, I will mention a lot of vocabularies. Yours is to write them down because all of them will find in the exam. And again, strengthen students' knowledge of several verbal forms very important. We have about 7 verbal forms. Today we will start them. By the end of today's lesson, we know all the 7. Alright, let's do things. So we'll look at another view of child. These are the things. We have one for child, one for Nisa, one for King, one for Kibal, one for Israel, one for Hussein, and the last one for Hussein. We hold these verbal things. We look at all the verbal things and their functions. We also are concentrating on child. We look at child verbal roots, their stem, and conjugation. Conjugation, I will explain when I get there. When we look at child perfect paradigm, child plus child perfect, how do we conjugate it? Now when we conjugate it is what we call paradigm. Word order or structure in English. In English, when we say word order or structure,
Hebrew pronouns. So out of that, we study 3 of such pronouns. We will look at the demonstrative pronouns, we will look at the relative pronouns, and then finally we'll look at the interrogative pronouns, which we use to ask questions: which, who, why, when, how. These are called interrogative pronouns. And relative pronouns are which, who, that. We call that one relative pronouns. Demonstrative pronouns: this, that, those. Then we look at possessive pronouns and pronouns itself. When we say possessive pronouns, your book, my book, their pen, their bicycle, we call these possessive pronouns. Then we look at what we don't have in English, but we have in Hebrew, or the definite direct object marker. When we say he gave the book to a boy, it is not definite because a boy is indefinite. But when we say he gave the book to the boy, in Hebrew, we have something that we use to mark the definite object. Don't be confused with the words. When I start teaching, I'll take my time and explain all the technical things I'm saying here. Then your last job, before I take you away from this course, is to help you to translate some Hebrew sentences, including the Bible. So in the table below, we have a guide as to what we are going to do for every day. So on the left side, we have number. And by number, we have the 1. So the 1 in Hebrew, days are yamim. Days are yamim. 1 day is yom. When it is more than 1 day, we say yamim. So the 1 activities that we do in the day are outlined below. Then we call activities in Hebrew hodaot. Activities hodaah, plural activities hodaot. So you see each day what activity we will be doing. That has been outlined there beautifully. And then we look at what material to read in each day. So reference material, we call it Kriyat Sefarim. That is reading books or reading materials. Then the corresponding pages that you can find whatever I'm teaching is also highlighted there. In Hebrew, page is Amud, plural is Amudim. I intentionally put those words there to also let you have a feel that we are in Hebrew class. Okay. So this is the grading system, no need to mention. And what is the mode of delivery? I'll give a lecture, I'll give exercises, and if there is a need for videos and audios, I may add that one. So these are your reading lists that you can refer to. All right. So today we are going to the board to start our business for today's part. Please, it will be suicidal if you forget the Hebrew alphabet, because this is a build-up on what I taught when we were studying the beginners Hebrew. This one, we assume you know the Hebrew alphabet and you know the Hebrew vowels. So we are going to look at the first item on our course outline. We are going to look at introduction to, we are looking at introduction to Hebrew verbs in general and their functions. Introduction to Hebrew verbs in general and their functions. Okay, I think there's a material to support what I'm going to teach. And I have placed them on the LMS. If you have time, visit the LMS and have a feel of the material. Okay, but look on the board before we come to the book. I'm going to the board. In Hebrew,
hello.
If you can't hear me, kindly let me know. Increase my volume.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Please, I raise my hand. Please, I would like to plead. Given our circumstance, having to go off, come on, and all that, is it possible to have a form of, I don't know if I should call it revision or recall, so that it will refresh our minds a bit, then we can zoom into the intermediate. Thank you.
Recall of what? What we did last time?
The Hebrew
It will make the word but I thought you have the materials and you have gone to. Okay, then I think it will be difficult because anyway, if you want that way, I can. but we are limited by time.
Extra classes.
Extra classes. But how do we have extra classes when we stay at Navlungo and I'm also staying here?
So you see our circumstances, it's not easy. And the pressures of ministry.
Oh, I understand. But we all endure the same tonight. I keep telling you, when even I was studying this course, I was still a pastor and I was working. And I combined both. But what is happening to my screen? Uh-oh. But that would be very quick. So I think in Hebrew, we learned that we have about 2 to 3 alphabets. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zayin, He, Shit, Yud, Tav, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Amen, Ayin, He, Tzaddik, Hu, Reach, Hum, Ten, Tav. Yeah. So these are the 20 Hebrew alphabets that we studied. And is the sound okay?
Yes, please. The sound is very clear.
Yes,
That's fine. That's fine. So on the board, you see that we have Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zayin, Hit, Tit, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samek, Ayin, P, Tzaddik, Kuf, Rish, Shin, Sin, Tav. So Aleph does not have sound. Bet is D, Gimel is G, Dalet is D, He is one type of H, Vav is like sometimes V, sometimes W, Zayin is Z, Hit is like CH in Hebrew, the sound. Tit is another type of T, Yod is Y, Kaf is K, Lamed is L, Mem is M, Nun is the N, Samek is one type of S, Ayin does not have translation value, P is P, sometimes it behaves like F, Tzaddik is also not in English but is PS, Kuf is Q, Rish is the R sound, Shin is one type of S, and is spelled usually as SH, Shine, Shone. Then Sin is also a type of S, and Tav is another type of T. So these are the 23 Hebrew letters, and we studied the vowels too. For the vowels, I can't go through today. So when you go back, you can go through. So let's go straight to the verse.
I will mention a lot of the backgrounds. Yours is to write them down because all of them will find together. And again, thinking figures.
I told you last semester that one way to make the class interesting is for you to buy toys for the class. We will use the toys to teach. So if you come across people selling toys, be interested to buy some for this class. We are starting to do there.
So what are you going to do with the toys?
Huh?
The toys, what are you using them for?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm saying the toys that we should buy. What are you going to use them for?
You said you were saying something, please.
Yeah, you said we should buy toys, and I'm saying the toys. What will we use the toys for?
For teaching. It's for teaching. It's one way to make the teaching something like to visualize the teaching. So I'm to use the KG approach to teach this one to make it very simple. So if you see a toy like a cane, you buy a car, you buy a motor, you buy, and we use all that one, those ones in class. All right. Okay. From last semester, you remember, we started with the participial verbs, and we've been told that a verb is an action word or a doing word. That means when they use a verb and they ask you to act on the verb that has been used, you should be able to do that, like dance. If I ask you to dance, you should be able to dance. If I ask you to stand, you should be able to stand. In Hebrew, we call a verb, the Hebrew word for verb is po'al. Po'al. In Hebrew, the Hebrew word for verb is po'al. Po'al too can be translated as a verb, but if you are using it, it could mean action or something demonstrative. But in Hebrew, in English, we say verbs. They also say verb is po'al. Verbs are po'alim. If you want to say verbs, you say po'alim. So this is po'al. Po'alim will be this. P, gachas, if you are adding the ra, and then it will be like this. So we call a verb po'al. Verbs are called po'alim. And in Hebrew too, equally, a verb would indicate an action. A verb is an action word or a doing word. In English, we have various types of verbs. We have the present tense, which is also future. And we have the present tense, we have the future tense, we have the past tense, and we have the imperative verbs. These forms all exist in Hebrew. If we talk about future tense, usually I will come, we will meet, we shall see each other, and all those things. They indicate future. If it is past, we have various forms of writing it. Sometimes most of them end with ed, like walked, discussed, killed, destroyed, but not all of them end in ed. Sometimes we have woke, W-O-K, could also be past, and the other forms. Kept, yes. Did I hear say? All right. So when we come to Hebrew verbs, it is important to note that all the forms have something we call roots. All the forms have something we call roots. And roots are the basic, usually 3 literal letters. Sometimes they may be 2. We call it dual. The root will be 3 literal letters that we add other things to make the verb. So remember that last semester when we were learning the participle, and 2, we said this, the root was ayin, mem, dalet. And last semester, we told you that we call this one roots. Out of these roots, you can write the present tense form of this, the past tense form of this, the future tense form of this, and even the imperative verbal form of this. Imperative is go, leave, stand. We call those one imperative verbs. And standing, that one is the participles we learned last semester. We learned last semester that if it is a man that you want him to stand, you say Omed, you add colon verb and theory here. So standing will be the same roots, but we put some verbs, some letters, some vowels into it, like colon verb, theory, become Omed. What we add to these three roots, this is root, the first root, second root, third root. Those other vowels and sometimes other consonants we add to the root. The root is the basic form that will help us to know the origin of the word. So this one becomes Omed, which means standing. If that is a single man standing, if it is plural, we said we will add din, direct, yod, men. That is what we studied last semester. Omed becomes din. And then if we are using the same root for a woman, the same root will stand in the participle. The root does not change. But if a woman is standing, last semester we learned that you will add OAS, Omedet, meaning a woman is standing. We also studied that if you want to say some women, the women are standing, you say Hanashim Umdot. So you put a dot here and then you add the feminine plural and then oats in eight. So Omed, Umdim, Omedet, Umdot. Kolek, Korhim, Olechet, Korkut. The verb, what do we call it? Yoshev, use bin, Yoshevet, use both. So that is what we learned last semester. With the same roots that we use to also form the types of verbs that we have in Hebrew. But what we add to the roots, for instance, the root for verb is this one. What we add to the roots will tell us whether it is past tense, whether it is future tense, or whether it is present tense. So there's one type of verb that we learn, but before then we'll go through all the verbs. So if you see these roots and a stem is what we add to the roots, like a stem vowel like kamat, pata have been added to the roots. It also forms another type of verb. So now it is whenever you see a verb with the first root having kamat and the second root having pata, you call those roots kal. But before we come to study kal in details, I want us to see the various verbal forms that we have in Hebrew before we now specialize on one. Now, in Hebrew, we have something we call verbal forms. This feature cannot be seen in English because when we say verbal forms, it means that that particular verb, something has been added to the roots, some particular letters and particular vowels have been added to the roots to indicate a particular form of verb. So anytime you see those letters that have been added to the roots and the vowels, it tells you that this is this type of verb, this is this type or this form of verb, this is this form of verb. So in Hebrew, we have 7 forms of verb. And some of them are these 7 verbs. Some of them are active verbs. Some of them are passive verbs. And some of them are reflexive verbs. Before we start with the forms, let me explain what we mean by active verb. In active verb, the subject performs the action. In active verbs, the subject is the person or the thing we talk about, performs a complete action. So example of active verb is Abraham killed the cat. Abraham killed the cat. It means that the subject, which is Abraham, subject is what we talk about, perform the action killed on the object cat. So Abraham performed the action on this animal. Whenever the subject is the one that performed the action, we call such verbs active verbs. The other type of verb is called passive, and they have some forms. Passive verbs also, in this case, somebody rather performed the action on the subject. Someone performed the action on the subject. For instance, Abraham was killed by the car. Abraham was killed by the car. Yeah, Abraham is not the one who killed the car, but rather the object performed the action. The action of the verb rather happened to the subject. Something that the subject is now not the one acting, but rather the subject acted on the subject. So Abraham was killed by the car. The word changed everything. It tells you that the car is now the one performing the action killed with Abraham. So whenever the subject is not the one doing the action, but the action is being done by someone against the subject, we call that one passive. And we have reflexive verbs. When we say reflexive verb, it means that the subject performs the action on himself. Abraham was washing himself. The child was bathing himself. So usually reflexive verbs are indicated by herself, himself, themselves, that kind of thing. So these are the functions that the verbs perform. A verb could be active, or it could be passive, or it could be reflexive, depending on the role that the subject is performing in connection to the verb. If the subject is the one performing the verb becomes active verb. If the subject is the one suffering from or somebody performed the verb or the action against the subject, then we call that type of verb as passive verb. And in reflexive verb, rather, the subject is performing the action on himself and not against another person. And it is marked by themselves, himself, herself, that kind of thing. So in Hebrew, these words are not in English. In order to, we are looking at the forms of the 7 forms of Hebrew verbs. The 7 forms of Hebrew verbs. So these forms could either be active, would either be passive, would either be reflexive. So when one simple way that we teach the 7 forms is to remind students that these forms, the name is also coming from the verbal root for verb itself. P, ayin, lamed. A verb I told you is opu a, opu alim, verbs. So this is the verbal root for verb. This is the verbal root for verb. P, ayin, lamed. So the 7 name, the name given to the forms were basically coined from these roots. So either they will add a suffix or something to the roots to get the name, and then they also add something to the vowels, or they just add something to, they change the what do you call it, the vowel stem. And I told you that stem is what we add to the vowel. So in Poa, for instance, the root is P, Ayin, Lamed, but what we have added is the phoneme and pattern. We make it Poa. Without them, we just call this one roots. So in order to study the forms, keep this root in mind, because the root is what they have used to give names to the 7 forms of verb that we have. So in order to get these verbs on our fingertips, we use what we call in Hebrew the menorah. You easily get it. Menorah means lamp. There is a lamp or candlestick in the temple that has 7 candlestands. And it is one easy way we use to teach this thing. So I'm drawing my candlestick. The candlestick looks like this with the stand. And you see that we put candles here. When you go to the temple, there are candles that are placed here to shine. And we call this thing menorah. When you go to internet and you test menorah, you will see various types of menorah. And it's usually in gold. We call it golden lampstand. And in Hebrew, we call it menorah. So the first form of verb, which we'll study in detail, is what we call the carve verb. The carve verb. And carve is spelled as half, quarter, lamed. So out of this verb, you can get the present tense form, you can get the future tense form, you can get the imperative form, and all that. That is why it is very broad. But the general forms are what we are studying. Before now, we specialize. With the first form is called the carve verbs. Carve verbs. Then the next type is what we call the nifal. So you see that nun is here, and the root for verb, which is P, Ayin, Lamed. Nifal. This is how we spell nifal. Only Kal is special, but the rest you see that P, Ayin, Lamed will be used continuously. So we have the Kal, then we have the nifal. The Kal is one type. So the forms are, you have the Kal, then the nifal. Then the other one, at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more. One more. There should be 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So Carl, we have in fact. Then the next form of verb is called the PA. Don't bother yourself with the words. PA. PA. And the third type, here we have the third type of PR. I will explain. We have the Carl, the far, the PL, the PR. Then the next type is called the Hifil. The next time called the Hifil. And then the next type is called Ifar. Ifil, Ifar. And then the final part we call the hits. R. L. There is no need to memorize these forms of verbs, but they exist in the language so that you have to know the sounds. So car, when we say car is an active verb. Car is an active verb, like he killed, he destroyed, he remembered. But when we look at the opposite of car is refer. Refer is passive. And sometimes to refer, some also call it positive. So refer could be he will be remembered. He will, or he was remembered. Refer would be he was remembered, or it could be he was caused to be remembered. Don't bother yourself with the form, but you just have to understand that we have these forms. Now, when it comes to PA, PA is also active. Carl is active. PA is active. Feel is active. Nifal is passive, and sometimes positive, and sometimes reflexive. Who are is passive. Who far is passive. So we have PA. So example of PA will be deber. Deber means the person spoke intensively. It could be like when he was speaking, he was shouting. But unlike Carl is not intensive action, like he killed. But when you use PL, it's also active verb. But whenever you use PL, it will mean that the person performed the action intensively. Like if it is killed, it will be like smash the animal into pieces. Put that one at the back of your mind, but I'm just helping you to know the forms. So here, the opposite will be pu'al. Pu'al is passive. Passive means he was killed intensively or he was smashed intensively, meaning that the action happens to the subject. And he feel. The feel to is also an active verb by its positive action. He feel like he was caused to kill. He was caused to kill. And then Bufar will be, he was killed by someone. He was killed by someone. Then the last one is the hit by L. The hit by L is also reflexive, like he was washing himself. Examples, like hit Kalia, washing himself. Hit Rabet, bathing himself. Hit Pael, praying by himself. So whenever you see these ones, they are also there. But the trick that I want to tell you when you see these various forms in your reading is that know that throughout, it is only Kal that is unique. But when we come to Nifal, Nifal has P, Ayin, Lamed, with Nun added at the beginning to tell you that this is one form. And that form always comes with Nun, beginning the verb. Then we move on to the next type of PA. PA to see that the root is still the P, Ayin, Lamed. But a change happens. In PA, usually there is direct root beginning at the first vowel under the first consonant. Then the second consonant has tail. But sometimes, if this is not a gacha, they wouldn't put a dot here. The feel too, you realize that the P, Ain, Lamed is here. But yet, in the Hifil, they bring K to begin with direct root also placed here. And you see that there's also root placed here for the Hifil. When it comes to Pu'al also realize that the only unique thing that has been added to the verbal root is Shuret and then Pata. Then we come to Bufar. Bufar to we realize that is the passive form of the Hifil. Hifil, Bufar, Piel, Pu'al, Kal, Nifal, then Hit Pael. So when we come to Hifil, you see that the root, what we call it, the stem that has been added to the root is erect, hay with shurek, hay with kibbutz, then we add the stem. So what you have to do in order to remember these stems, which we are not going to study all, but we limit ourselves to one type. You see how it functions, is that first of all, remember the roots for the verb being kept throughout, except for car. And remember that why they have the name they have is because of the verbal, the vowel stems. When we say vowel stems, it means what have been, the vowels that have been added to the root stem, the roots. So the vowel stems in this case that have been added here is the direct root PA, direct root table. And here too, the vowel stem is P, Ain, the root stem is P, the root is P, Ain, Lamed. But the stem that has been added is the Shurek Kal. So you use your ears to just capture these names. Kal, you hear Al, Kal. Nifal, you hear Ni, Nifal. Then we have PA. You use your ears to hear the sound. EA. Then Pu'al. Then Hifil. Then Ufar. Then we have the hit by L. I'm removing this simple diagram that we use to remember when we are writing, and now I'm taking you through one by one. Now, the first one I told you was the cow. Some call it cow. Most books will call it cow. Few books, in order to maintain the verbal root, we also call this one pa'a. Few books will call this one pa'a, the cow. And I told you that it is an active verb and it tells you of a simple action, like he killed, he fled, he slapped, simple action. So here, what it means is that whenever you are forming a cow verb, it could be any root. The root could be it could be ayin, mem, dalet, which is for standing. And all that you have to do is that you add the root stem, the vowel stem, a. These two are, you add it here, and it becomes a car, like Ahmad. So Ahmad will be, he stood. If you have a root like Aleph, Kaf, Lamed, and you want to say he ate, because he says that the car is the name given to it, because car simply means simple in Hebrew. So car verb simply means simple verbs. And another way we call car verbs is pa'a. And here they just use the
Hello, sir.
root for verbs, which is P, I,
Hello.
language, to indicate how these verbs are written. And so
Hello,
when
sir.
you want to make the verb a
Hello,
verb,
sir.
you just add commas.
Hello, sir.
Yes,
Sir,
Can
please.
you
I'm
change
listening.
the marker?
The marker.
Yeah, to black marker.
Okay. Okay.
Sir, please, can you slow down a little?
Yeah, I'll slow down.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So what I'm teaching you now is that we've seen the several forms of verb in person. Because I just use the minora to show you where we place the active and then the passive forms. But now I'm taking you through one by one, slowly. So I told you the first form in my minora. This is the minora I built, the 7 lampstands. And I told you the first one is Kal or Pa'ar. So we are now looking at the first type Pa'ar. And I told you that it is used for active verbs. Active verbs are those verbs, as I explained, that the subject performed the action. For example, if I want to say I ate, the root for eating is Aleph, Kaf, Lam. But if you look at this, the name for this first form of vowel called the cow or the pa'al, all that you have to do to make this one I ate the food. If you put commas here and to bring pata here, and this will become to eat or X, something X. Abraham, aha, Abraham X, eta bananot, the bananas, aha. If it is standing, so this one represents the roots, just as this one is now taking the place of the P island. So anywhere that you meet at all, the sound should follow just as the way this now is pronounced, pa'a. So for instance, if it is he stood, the root for standing is this one. If you say Omed, it will be standing. But if you want to use the cow form, you say Ahmad, ah. So A comes here, Pata comes here, and it becomes Ahmad. So Ahmad will mean he stood. Ahad will mean the X, Ahmad. What did I read with you? Walk. I taught you walk. To walk is say Lamed half final. So if you want to say
Hello, sir.
would have been yes. Yes.
Did you say he understands or he stood?
He stood. I told you that what we add to the roots, make this one a present tense, a past tense, or a future tense. And I'm telling you that in the first type, we have ka or the pa'a, which represents a simple action. And it is an active verb because whenever you use this type of ka verbs or the pa'a verbs, the subject performs the action of the verb on a subject, on an object. And so the reason why they call this one pa'a does not mean anything, but it is a way to give you a clue that this K Ein Lamed is the root for verb. But they put the kamat patah under it to tell you that this one basically, but not at all times, comes with kamat patah under the root to form the ka verbs. So if you want to say the root for eating is Aleph Ha Lamed. So what you add in this root will make it either eating or ate or will eat. So now we are looking at the passive, the active simple verbs, ka. And so when we want to say the earth is aha, the stood will be amad. So it's aha. The first a is amad, the second is pata. Amad. Who amad? He stood. You come back to ka because that is what you study for today. You look at various forms of it. And then the next one, the opposite of kal or pa'al is what? Nifal. This is the second form. So remember that when I wrote kal here, I wrote nifal here. I wrote nifal here. And here it is passive. Some also say it's causative. So nifal means either you if I want to say kill, the verb for kill is kata. Kuf, taf, lamed. This is the roots, the verbal root for kill. Kuf, taf, lamed. If I want to say the passive form of kill, kal is the active form, the passive form, the action happens, and someone performed the action on the subject. So if I want to say he was killed, I would only bring, because he said nifar, I will bring me, the ni sound should come. Al sound, nifar, the a that was missing here. Usually we use different colors to show you what is happening. So this is the verbal roots. But the sense say that ka, also called the pa'a by some books, is the simple form of verb and it is active. The passive form is the nifar. So if you want to say he was killed, because the passive form is nifar, you should know the rules for kill, which is kata. The verbal rules for kill is kaf, lamed. So if you want to say he was killed, the sound is what you have to bring there. The first one is ni. You come here. So ni. And it's r, nifar. R, the r sound will come here. So it becomes nitar. Nitar means he was killed. If I come to say
hello, sir.
Qatar means he killed. But the moment I add the passive form nitar and I say who nitar, it means he was killed. Nitar. These ones, don't bother yourself with memorizing, but you have to see how these things work so that when you couldn't continue this course and you are doing further studies, you wouldn't know only the car, but you knew these types of forms that you have. Nitar. So apart from this, I told you the next type is the PA. PA is this. PL. And PL is also active verb. So PL. PL is active, very active verb. So in PL, the action is performed with some kind of intensity. So if the car or the PAL says he killed, in the PL, both of them are active, but this one is intensive action. It will be he killed intensively. So kill, the roots, verbal roots for kill is calf, language. So if you want to say he killed intensively or he destroyed, you just put the same sound here. He ate. So he, unfortunately, I couldn't get color marker to buy a different color to purchase. That is not helping. So it will be kite. There will be dots here, theory here. We put a dot here because this is not fine. There will be kite. Kite. So the moment you say kite, it means he really kills the thing, or he destroyed the thing, or he killed the thing intensively. So that is for the PL. The passive form of PL is the PUR. So sometimes you'll be reading, you see the same roots, but the sound will change. You see, this one, I hear kite, but you hear that the passive form of the PL is the PUR. The sound will be PUR. 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 So PUR, PL, PUR. So what do you think should be the passive way to write he was killed? He was killed intensively. He was killed intensively. So the root is like calf, landed. So because this one is to act, then will be calf. And the dot is placed in the second verbal roots because in PA, you see PA takes this kind of dots in the second roots. And then you also comes here. That is why these are all shown. So this one becomes Putan. And Putan will mean that he was killed intensively. So it is the passive form of the PA. The passive form of the PA. Then the next type will be the Hefil. Hefil is also spelled as this.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, please, will you come back to the first one you just cleaned from the board? And then
Of course.
how about the first one? The recent one you just clean from the board.
Yeah, we'll go through all that again.
Yeah, but I want you to differentiate the first example from that of the second example. The first one you said he was killed, and then the second one's you said he was killed intensively, and you made mention of some form of being reflexive or what? I didn't understand the difference
so
between.
That one would be he was killed. He was killed intensively. So I told you that in the cow or the pa'al, it is this side are all active verbs, but they also differ a bit. Active verbs, this one is just simple action. Simple action means he killed. The opposite of the cow or the pa'al verb is the nifar. So if you killed, the passive form would be that he was killed, or you killed, you were killed, or he killed, he was killed. This one is simple action. The next type is PL. PL is also active verb, but this one it is intensive action. Intensive action.
Yeah, so
So
where I have problem is where you are saying he was killed, it becomes passive. And then being passive, he was killed by what? Through what? And that is where
okay, so you can add, some verbs are transitive verbs, some verbs are not intransitive, some verbs are intransitive verbs. So you can add anything. Like Paal, he killed the snake. I hope you get that action.
Yes, please. Yes, please. It's okay now.
Action. And in the passive, you can say he was killed by the snake. He was killed by the snake. Then we come to, and we know, I told you the root for kill is kata, kof, taf, lamed. The only
Hello,
thing
sir.
is that should be placed. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, sir, but please, the use of the word intensive in the explanation, what does it mean? Is it the action? The action was done with power, or maybe you are looking at it being intentional?
Yeah. So when I say a verb is intensive action, it tells you of the strength with which the action was carried out. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Were you saying something else?
No, please.
So I told you that we have simple action. In the cow, the case of the cow and the Paal, we have simple action. Like he was killed by the snake. And the root for kill is kof, taf, lamed, as we have on the board. So kite, kata means killed. So he was killed by the snake. You can just substitute the vowels under the verbal root pay, ayin, lamed, under the verbal root for kill to become kata, because the verbal root, the vowels that we have under is kamat and pata. In the passive, when you say he was killed by the snake, meaning that the action rather happened to the subject. He was killed by the snake. So here you would just say nektar, because nifar comes with nun and hirek, then the a sound. So you just substitute that one on the katar root to become nektar, meaning that he was killed. You can add the by the snake. He was killed by the snake. Then the next type I was teaching that you were asking questions about on that is the PA. PA represents intensive action. When we say intensive action, it tells you of the strength with which the action was carried out. So if you say, you hear the sound EL, so if the verbal root for kill is kof, taf, lamed, if you want to say somebody killed an animal intensively, you just say kitir, because the sound is PL. So you substitute the EA sound under the root to become kitir. So kitir couldn't be he killed, but rather, though it is an active verb, it will be an intense action, meaning he killed the snake intensively. Or you can even say he smashed the snake into pieces. It tells you of the strength with which the action was performed. They say with pu'al. Pu'al is also intensive, but here the action happens to the subject. The subject was killed intensively, or the subject, he was smashed into pieces, or he was killed intensively. You get me? Though they are all action, but the actions differ. One is simple action, one is intensive action, and one is causative action. He feel is causative action. He feel is causative action. When we say causative action, yes.
Hello, sir. So,
yes.
So with the explanation you are giving, how do we link intensively with respect to how the thing was being done or how the action was being done to that of an adverb, indicating the manner in which it was being done? Does that one has link, or in Hebrew we don't have nothing like an adverb?
There is also that one there. But sometimes just one word there, when we see just a word, we have adverbs too in Hebrew. He danced beautifully. If it is a man who roked Yafeh, he danced beautifully. That is also there. If it is a woman, he rokeded Yafa, she danced beautifully. That is also there. But sometimes just a word that you see, the form of the verb should also communicate to you how the action was done. That is also there. So here we are learning about verbal forms, the form in which the verbs occur. And we are looking at the passive form and with it opposite, the active form and the opposite being the passive form. So that is when we look at Kal, which is simple action, or Pa'al, which is simple action, we look at the Nifal. When we look at the Pliel, which is intensive action, though it is just killed, if you put it to, if you say Kitir, it also means killed, but it is not just ordinary killed. It tells you that that killing was done intensively, like the bear and the bear. They are all, one is like Kal, the bear, and the bear. The bear means you speak when you know you are very passionate about something and you are speaking. It is different from the bear when I'm just speaking slowly like I'm teaching. But when somebody is really angry and is speaking with that kind of passion, you see the way the person is speaking. So the moment you see the form of the verb, it should communicate to you how the action take place or took place. So Pierre, if you say Kiter, if you say Kiter, Kiter and Qatar are not the same because the presence of the E, which even this dot sound, tells you that this action was done intensively. In the same way, Qatar, means he was killed. You can even say mercilessly. He was killed mercilessly by the dogs. He was killed mercilessly, so it will be Qatar. He was killed mercilessly by the dogs. That is also intensive, but here it's passive. It's intensive action, all right. But here it happened passively. He was killed mercilessly by the dog. But when we see it, it is just Qatar, but it gives you an idea of how the action in question happens. And the next type of form of verb is the he feel. He feel too, the only thing is they are just like the feel. But we add he direct at the beginning and direct root at the end to make EE sound. He feel. So in this case, still using the verbal root for kill. When I finish, I'll take you through this textbook for you to see what the author has also written. This is Cook, this is Staff, this is Lambert. So if you want to say this one too is active verb, but it is causative action. Causative action means that something caused or made the subject act. Something caused or made the subject act. So this one will be fictive. Fictive. Because we feel. You just substitute the pay iron laminate is this book staff laminate. And then what has been added? If we have colored marker, we usually write the added additional things with this one for you to see how things are happening. But my marker is really faint. That is why I can't read it. It becomes fictive. So if you say the field, I told you it's causative action. It means he was caused to kill. Something caused him or he was made to kill. It tells you how the action was done. Like you've seen that, God forbid, okay, somebody has killed someone. But when he uses this verb, hitir, who hitir etaish, it means that he was made to kill the man or he was forced to kill the man. He didn't do it out of his own intention or volition, but he was made to do that. He was made to kill the man. So the opposite of ifil is what? Who? Ifil is kufar. Kufar. So here it becomes the opposite of this minora. Becomes proof. The field becomes kufar. It means that someone was made to kill him. So that is the passive form. But there is a third one. There's the seventh one, which we call the hits. So hit file means we add hits at the beginning. Then the file, you call it hit file. Hits. Hit file. Hit file. Hit file. Here, it is the only one that we call, sometimes we define as reflexive. The reflexive verb. It means that the subject the person is performing, he performs it on himself. Like, we have a word like hit career. You meet a word like this, hit career. Hit career means you are bathing yourself. Hit career. You see that the sounds are the same. Hit career. It's ra besh. It's rabesh. It's fa'el. It's kalia. It's rabesh. You see the sounds. The only thing that has been added is the hits, plus these vowels. So if you say hitrabet, it means he was washing himself. The difference between Hikalia, he was bathing himself, and hitrabet, he was washing himself. These are all different. So in the reflexive one, the person does the action in himself. If you read the notes raw before coming to class, it will help you. Now that we've seen the 7 forms of verbs that we have, before we limit ourselves to the car verbs, let's go back to the notes. Now I'm studying the note with you. It's state. It's staff, not state. a staff. He's asking whether the hit per L, the T sound, is it tav or tit? Is tav. Okay. We want to now visit the textbook and study from it. Can you see it on your screen?
No.
Okay. Can you see the book?
Yes, please. Yes.
Now, I have taught all that I'm going to read from the book to you. So now let's go through the book together. He says, Introduction to Hebrew Verbs. Hebrew verbs are composed of a three-consonantal root called a shoresh. Shoresh means it's a Hebrew word for root. Each letter of the root is numbered right to left. Root 1 represented by I. That means the three roots, for instance, the poal, the verbal root that they use to give the names of the verbal forms is P, Ayin, Lamed. So the first one, you can call it, the I will be the P. The I will be the Ayin. Then let me write only that on the board. So verbs are composed of a three-consonantal roots called the shoresh. So the P, Ayin, Lamed. From this, you can form any type of verb that you have. And the roots are many. Like walking too. The root for walking is P.
Please, we are not seeing the board. Oh.
You are not seeing the board.
Yes, please.
You can't see the board?
Yes, please.
No,
No,
we
sir.
can see it. Just that it is
okay,
far.
you don't worry. Is it okay?
Yeah, it's okay now.
Okay. So these two examples are what we can call consonantal roots. The Hey Lamed Kaf is the root for walk. So from this, you can form any type of verb. Okay, let's go on. So each letter of the root is numbered always from right to left. I, meaning each Roman numeral is representing one root in the order that they appear from right to left. These become important when identifying weak verbs. These usually involve guttural letters. I wouldn't teach weak verbs in this lecture because weak verbs simply means that one of the roots has a guttural or nun. One of the roots of the verbs has a guttural or nun. So for instance, pay, ayin, lamed. Ayin is a guttural, so it's a weak verb. Hey, lamed, kaf. Hey is a guttural, so it's a weak verb. But there are some verbs like lomed, learning. The root for learning is lamed. Lamed, mem, dalet. That is a strong verb because in this root, we don't have any guttural. So any three consonantal roots that has one of the root, whether the I one or the I or the I being a guttural is called a weak verb. And in English, there's nothing like weak verb. But in Hebrew, they call them weak verb because the presence of the guttural will change the vowel that should come under it. Okay, let's go on. I've taught you this one, and now you know the roots and their positions. Depending on the form of the verb, listen, depending on the form of the verb, I've just taught you the verbal form. And I told you that we have the basic roots that we add or preface. Preface means we place something in front of it, and we also sometimes we preface and we add some vowels to make different forms of the verb. So I have also told you that one, depending on the form of the verb, prefaces like the nifar, nun is added, the hufar, he, shurek was added, the hifir, he, hirekud was added. So depending on the form of the verb, prefaces and or sometimes suffixes are added to identify the person doing the action of the verb. In this particular form that we are learning, I did not add the suffixes. You add suffixes, what you add at the end of the roots. We add suffixes when especially we are studying the future tense. I want us to focus on the past tense. So I wouldn't teach you those ones that ends with suffixes. Now, look at this example. Hebrew grammars use either katar. You see, katar is what I use for kill. It means to kill. Or pakad means to visit, as their paradigm for strong verbs to show the various prefixes and suffixes that can be attached to a shoresh or root. So what he's saying here is that when you want to show how the pa'ar, the nifar, the pir, the pu'ar, the hifir, the hufar, and then the hit by L happens, some of them, when they want to use strong verbs, they want to give you examples of strong verbs using the same form. They will either choose to use the roots for the verb killed, katar, or for pakad. Since there are in these two types of verbs, we don't have any guttural in them. Guttural are aleph, ayin, he, hit, and sometimes reach. You see that there are no gutturals here. So if you want an example with that guttural, the best one you should use is to kill. One way to use is to kill, to use the root for killing, since it has no guttural. So then where you have to put dots, you can put it, and then pakad, which means to visit. So they just use it as paradigm. But any other verbal roots, the same form can be used for it. We'll come to that. I hope you have understood what I'm saying.
Not really.
What did I say so far? Now, you see, the basic ones, and now I'm going through the notes that you are to read on your own with you. So if you mute yourselves, mute yourselves. Mute yourselves. Okay, so whatever I say, and whenever you say nothing, be ready to tell me I've said. Because if you are not listening, you can't understand. I told you that, okay, verbs are composed, all types of verbs are composed of a three-consonantal root that we called a shoresh. In Hebrew, root is called a shoresh. When we say consonantal root, what does it mean? It means that out of the three consonants, when we say consonant, they are the alphabets. Those three chosen alphabets, the verbs are formed from three, usually from three alphabets. So out of these three alphabets, we can form any type of verb that we want from that. And he said each alphabet of the root or each letter of the root is numbered from right to left. I. So the P will be I, the ayin on the pa'ar or the pu'ar will be I, then the lamed will be I. The second example is hulek or halak. The he will be the first. Please mute yourselves. The he will be the first letter, root letter. The lamed will be the second root letter and the kaf the third root letter. In lamed too, or lumed or whatever. The lamed will be the first root letter, the mim will be the second root letter represented by I, and the dalet will be the third root letter. Yes. I'm listening, sir. If we're not talking, I'm going on. We said that these become important when identifying what we call weak verbs. And I told you that when we say a verb is weak, it simply means it has a gotcha in the verbal roots. So the three letters that are provided, one of them is a gotcha, and the gotchas are Aleph, He, Hit, Ein, Rish. And we said, depending on the form of verb that you want to write, whether past tense or present tense or future tense, you do so by either adding some letters to the root and some vowels to the root, or at the beginning of the root. You see, so whenever you want to write any type of vowel, either you add some letters and vowels at the beginning of the root letters, or you add some letters to the root letters, some letters at the end of the root letters that we have. So that will help you to know whether you are talking about a present tense, a past tense, a future tense, and all that, all that. So what you add to the root will tell you which form of verb you have in mind. This one to have demonstrated it on the board. For example, we saw that at the active side, we have the cow form or the pa'al form. And then when we go to the passive form, we prefix ni to make it nifal. The nun erect was prefixed to make it nifal, which means he was killed. The pa'ar, he killed. Then when we come to the pa'ir, we saw that in the pu'ar, nothing was prefixed, but just the verbs changed. But when we come to the hifil, we saw that he and hirek yud have been prefixed to the roots, pa, pe, ain, lamed, to make hifil. When we go to hufar, we saw that he shurek has been added to the beginning, to the root pe, ain, lamed. Then we saw hit pa el too, that in the hit pa el, we've added something. That is hit. He, hirek, tav, at the beginning of the word. So that is what he was talking about here. Then he said, Hebrew grammars use either katar to kill or pakad to visit as their paradigm verb for strong verb to show the various prefixes and suffixes that can be attached to a shoresh. So you can use the root kaf, taf, lamed to see, to work on the 7 forms of verbs that I spoke about. So katar will become nectar. Then the PL form will become kitir. Kitir will become in the passive form kutar. Then to become hiktir in the hifil form. Then hufar form will become huktar. Then hitpael will be hiktar, hiktael. Hiktalel. So the same with pakad. Pakad will become nikpad. nik, nif, kad in the nifar form. The PA form will become picade. The puar form will become pukad. Then the hifil form will become hik, kid. Then hufar form will become hook, hufkad. Then his parallel form will become hit, pakid, hit, pakid. I will explain that one later when we get time we can look at the paradigms. These verbs are called strong verbs because they do not contain any guttural letters. Resh, ayin, he, aleph. And they change predictably throughout the paradigm. So if you study the paradigm that I took you through, you will see why they have changed. So when we talk about strong verbs, look at these 4 examples. Only one is a strong verb. Pakad is a strong verb because it doesn't have any guttural. The 3 roots, the I roots, which represent the first consonant, is P, and it's not a guttural. The ayin root, which is represented by kaf or II, is not a guttural. And the lamed root, which is represented by D or dalet ye, is not also a guttural. But the rest, we see that shalach, the he, ending shalach, the he here, this he is a guttural. Gala, ga'a, the aleph is a guttural. Halak, the he is a guttural. I have also taught you active, passive, and reflexive verbs. So I'm reading through what is here. Before I give a general overview of the verb stems, the verbal stems are also called binyanim. In Hebrew, binyan means building. So they are building blocks. We have one, the fundamental verb that we built upon was the P, Ayin, Lamed, and we built upon it to become Nifal, Pir, Pu'ar, Hifir, Ufar, then Hitpa'er. That is why we call them blocks. We built on the basic one to get the other forms. We need to understand what active, passive, and reflective is. When we say active, what is this? When the subject is doing the action, the boy hits the ball. The boy hits the ball. Example in English. When we say passive, what does it mean? When the subject is receiving the action, we say it is passive. For example, the boy, which is the subject, was hit by the ball. Then the third type is the reflective verb, when the subject does something to himself. For example, the boy, which was the subject, hit himself with the ball. The boy hit himself with the ball. The boy hit himself with the ball. Then I've also taken you through the 7 major building blocks of verbs or forms of verbs. The first one is the car, which is the active voice or simple basic action. I told you that the opposite of the car, which is the passive, is the nifar. It means passive voice or simple basic action. Then we went to the second type, which is called the PA, which is active voice, but the action is intensive action. Then we look at a passive form called the pu'ar, which is also passive, but the action is intensive. Then we look at hitpa'er, which is reflexive voice, but also yet intensive action. And you know what we mean by reflexive voice. And we look at hifil, which is active voice, but causal action. And we looked at the hufal, which is passive voice, but causal action. I've explained all. And this is just an additional information that vast majority of the verbs in the Bible or scripture are Carl verbs. Carl verbs. So let's go on. So what the binyanim or the basic blocks of verbs that I taught you just now are 7. And we say that when you are translating based on the context, they may have several range of uses based on the context. The Carl will be simple action, or it could be stative. When we say stative verb, he was sleeping, he is walking, what we call the verb to be are all examples of stative verbs. Then the nifal to, I have told you that it is passive, but sometimes it could be reflexive or it could be reciprocal action. The PL2, I told you, is an active voice, but the action is strong. He feel to, I told you, is a passive, but sometimes the action could be causative. And hit by L2, you do the thing to yourself, or you do it together with other people. So when we notes, we understand. And this type we want to cut it. Yes. Yeah, let's break at maybe 10:15. I'm equally tired. We went for prayer meeting at dawn, and the moment I return, I have to start teaching. So maybe 10:15, we'll break for maybe 30 minutes. So all that I taught you is what has been presented in this diagram, showing the forms. So the basic form, I said you can rather call it Carl or Pa'ar. Carl Sambus will say Pa'ar to show you this verbal, the vowel stem that has been added to the root. When we say stem, stems as the things that we add to the root. It could be a consonant, it could be a vowel. So this we call it vowel stem. So the Carl form, the vowel stem, they are using the roots Kof for I, the first letter, then Tap for the second letter, then Lamed for the third letter. So for instance, the Carl form will be Qatar. And you see that there is Kamat, that is that type of A, under the first root called Kof. And Qatar in translation would be he killed maybe the dog. Who Qatar etakelev, he killed the dog. Nectar will be passive. Just saying nectar will mean that he was killed by something. Kiter. Now look at what is happening here. The dot in the taf is so important. It is one reason to identify that it's an intensive action. And you see that all those intensive actions, they have that dot in the second root. So here, the first root is captive, tit lamed. By the tit, there's a dot. It tells you it's intensive action, but in the passive, you see that that dot is still there. And also in katir, you see that the dot is also there. But all the others, there are no dots. There are no dots in them. So we have kitir being the active, kutar being the passive. Then katir being the reflexive. Then hiktir. For hifir, we have hiktir. Then hufar, we have huftar. The carpet here is atuf. Kamat atuf. So these are the 7 forms of verbs we just went through. because we've done that, we will now give ourselves 30 minutes break. 30 minutes break. So let's be back at 10:36. Is that right?
Recording stopped.
Okay.
Yes.
That's okay, sir.